We now continue with Smurf.
I was talking to my neighbor who used to work in law enforcement in Moscow and the surrounding region, and that is how I came across these stories. He had a lot to tell, but let me give you one that stood out to me. I'm not sure if I really believe these or not, but the way he told them, he sounded convincing. He sounded like he believed them. B. Moscow police officer. B. on duty in the 1990s. 2 eyewitnesses have been retrieved from the nearby woods from a hike. They are spouting tons of crazy shit, and 7 of their friends are missing or dead. This is what they told the officers. It was a group of people, mostly young students or dropouts and the like. They had a certain hobby that they loved to do. They would take a map of Russia, throw a dart, and wherever it landed is where they would go. More specifically, they would try to hike in mountainous regions that were closest to the area that the dart landed on, or explore vast forests or swamps. Anywhere that was hard to explore is where they would go for. They would often ask locals for help in this regard. So, this particular time, they are doing something called a micro-hike, where they drive out to the place and then continue on foot and do like a loop. They parked their cars and then headed out. There were 9 people in total on this hike, 5 men and 4 women. They made it into the woods and reached a good place to stop for the night that they had planned out in advance using maps. They settled on the bank of a river near the forest and set up some makeshift beds and a little campfire. This is where the story of these 2 eyewitnesses starts to get a little bit crazy. They said that at nighttime, the trees started rustling really audibly, even though there was no wind nearby to cause it. One told the officer that he kept seeing these dim flashes of white light in different parts of the forest. Not enough to illuminate the whole area, but enough to see shadows and shapes. He could see the shapes and shadows of small animals low to the ground. These flashes apparently happened intermittently for 30 minutes, and it freaked out all of the women. They were frightened, and many could not sleep at all that night. The decision was made early in the morning to go back to the cars and leave due to the women panicking. So they packed up camp and set off. The closer they got to the cars, the better everyone started to feel. The guy told the officer that people started to laugh and joke about the nearby military base being the culprit behind the lights. Then someone else laughed and chimed in that the shadows were soldiers doing a nighttime routine or a march. One of the eyewitnesses said that at this time he was walking with his friend Max and discussing buying a UAZ van for the group adventures. While talking, he suddenly saw his other friend, Kolya, just fall down to his left. He did not trip or make a noise like he had snagged on anything. Just 1 minute he was walking, and the next minute he was face down in the grass. His other friend, Marinka, was with him and tried to lift him off of the floor, but he was way too heavy. They thought it was either a prank or that maybe he had passed out from hitting his head. They were not paying attention at that point until Marinka screamed, and they ran over to find Kolya was not breathing and had no pulse. They told the officers that Kolya's face had turned some kind of strange burgundy color. There was blood pouring out from his ears. When they rolled him over and took a closer look at him, they saw that his eyes were bulging and almost popping out of his head. He had this kind of rash on his skin, some on his face, some near his wrists. The skin looked rough and irritated all of a sudden. But the eyes, they had swelled up and were trying to squeeze out of the socket. Blood was coming from his eyes, just like with his ears. After that, they said that everything just went crazy, that everyone was just gripped by this mass hysteria and that no one was thinking properly. The girls were crying and rushing around in a panic. Someone suggested leaving the body in the forest. Another said that some people should guard it from animals. Someone else wanted to all lift his body and take it back to the car. The eyewitness telling this story said that all of the sounds of the forest had stopped by that point. The only thing he could hear was sobs coming from the girls all rushing around. And then he saw a bird fall out of the sky. It just shot down from above one of the trees and hit the ground. But then it happened more times. One fell from a tree where it was perched nearby, and they saw a squirrel fall out from its tree hole. He said that out of nowhere, Max started screaming while covering his ears, and that he just started running. He ran but tripped over a branch and hit the deck. but he was not the only one. Other friends started to go crazy too. One of the girls started clutching their head while rocking back and forth on the ground while sobbing. One guy was flat on his stomach and rolling back and forth, and he was wailing in agony and saying, "Please make the sound stop." But the eyewitnesses and the other who survived could not hear anything. Only those two were unaffected. They tried to help, but when the eyewitnesses went to help Max up, he grabbed at his leg and tried to pull him to the ground. He asked him what the hell he was doing, and he said that Max started biting at his ankle and trying to pull him down to the ground. He saw that after maybe 30 seconds of trying to help him, Max had blood coming from his ears too. They knew they could not do anything to help and had no medical knowledge, so because they did not have phones back then, they rushed to the cars and went straight to the police station. My neighbor was one who attended there, and this is what he told me. We conducted our investigation. We had a team of officers sent out to the immediate area to conduct a search and rescue mission. My superior said it was idiot kids on drugs, but that we had to check to be safe in case they had overdosed and killed themselves. Within a 2-kilometer radius of where the eyewitnesses told us that they were, we found people. We found 2 people down by the river where they had set up a camp overnight. They were delirious. They were speaking nonsense. The one who could speak was just making sounds and gurgling while he looked at us as if he thought he was actually talking and saying words. The other one, she could not talk at all. Her eyes were just rolling back into her head, and she could not stand up without falling back down. Her legs just stopped working underneath her. We only found one other body. They were dead. We had medical experts perform an autopsy, and other than a small amount of alcohol in their blood, he did not have any substances in his body. No drugs, no nothing. Cause of death was attributed to severe head trauma and internal damage and a bleed on the brain. There was no sign of any outward injuries or any marks on the head or face that suggested blunt force trauma. We searched for the other 4 missing people for months after that. A lot of locals volunteered to help with the search effort, but even when we kept extending the search area, nothing came up. And once it got to a certain point, we were told to stand down and that the case had closed. The sounds of the parents when we had to tell them that their babies were missing still haunts me. He had one more that he told me that wasn't just your typical run-of-the-mill crime encounters. He was an officer for nearly 30 years of his life, and this was the only other thing he saw that he could not explain. I will tell it from his perspective. This happened somewhere on the Oka River, back before the collapse of the USSR. The riverbed needed to be deepened and cleaned because a barge carrying cargo for a factory could not pass by. There was rocks and floating debris blocking the way. Some asshole had dumped metal scraps and other trash in the river. They brought in a floating dredge and a floating excavator and began dredging and cleaning the bottom. The workers cleaned for a while and found all sorts of stuff dumped there. Bits of scrap metal, tin sheets, random clothes, lots of wrappers from food. The most intriguing thing that they found that had sunk right to the bottom were these black balls. They were probably around 15 centimeters in diameter, and they described them as very smooth. One of them said it felt like polished glass. They found 5 of these in total. One of the workers got curious and smashed one of these balls against some rock, but it would not smash at all. No matter how much effort he used, he could not crack it. They got the heaviest worker there to jump on it with all of his weight, but it did not work, and the guy just fell over. There were not even any scratch marks on these things from being hit against the rock. Management caught wind of these finds and confiscated them. They claimed that they were the property of the company since they were found during a job. They thought that they had found some kind of historical artifact that they could turn for a profit. One of the company heads called a specialist, as he wanted him to come down and appraise the items and determine their historical value. I think he worked for a museum in the next city over, but he never went there. That was not the only thing that they found down at the shore that day. One of the management claimed they had also found these logs of wood that were stained this black color. They were all completely identical and cut into long, square logs. They were shiny and all identical. The next weekend is where the police were called. Most of the management were gone. They were at home, thinking about the money. Some of the workers, along with a guard or two, were staying at the site overnight. The management returned, and that's when we were called. An ambulance was sent down there, along with a few cars of police. The men who had stayed overnight, 4 of them in total, if including the guard, were all dead. The scene was horrific. One of the men was missing an arm. One of the men had bits of skin missing and indents where chunks of flesh were missing. There were no marks that showed that a knife or any sharp object had been used. We came across those logs that management mentioned. They were pretty close by to the bodies. Next to the log was the remnants of a handful of beers and tons of tools used for the job. I got a look at that log up close, and if you looked at the other end, there was actually a hole inside of it. I'm not sure if it was there when it was found, but it looked cut into by something sharp. There was this hollow space inside. Not massive, but big enough that someone not too tall could probably cram themselves into it. Inside this hollow space, there were streaks of something dark. Some kind of oily liquid. It smelled exactly like gasoline. We got asked to cordon off the area after reporting this in, and the scene was taken over by investigators. I never learned what happened there, or the exact cause of death. I've posted this before, but didn't save it. It's a long story, but I will abridge it thoroughly. I was 19 when this happened. We were driving, 5 people in the car. It was my GF and I, my best friend and her BF, and a third wheel male friend. We are going to a park party with about 20 to 30 people. We're in an area with which we are unfamiliar. We get a little bit lost on the drive there. After a while, we think we found the place finally. We park the car in the car park. We are the only car there. We can see a congregation of around 15 people in the dark, casting shadows through a bonfire. We assume it's our group, so we get out of the car and start walking down this massive hill to the group. It's really dark, but my friend's boyfriend thinks he recognizes someone and yells out a greeting to them. The whole group of people look towards us in pretty much unison and start walking towards us. We stop, and we still cannot really make out individual people. It's only when they are like 20 feet away from us that we finally realize, A, it's not our group, and B, it's a group of like 15, 25 to 30-year-old men. I say, "Oh, sorry guys, we thought you were someone else." "Wow, you fucked up then, didn't you?" At least 2 of them, maybe more, pull out knives. We all back the hell off immediately, but they are pretty quick to react, so I just yell at the girls to run. 2 guys start chasing them, but the girls were track runners, so they turned and started running to the car really quickly. The 3 of us just have our hands up, like, "Please do not kill me, please." They group around us. The girls have arrived at the car, but 2 guys are about halfway there, chasing them. My best friend's BF lets out this defeated howl, and his eyes well up. All the saliva comes out from his mouth. I'm like, what the hell? Until I realize he's got the car keys in his pocket. I hear the girls start trying to force the car doors open, then scream something at each other, followed by the smashing of glass, and the car alarm starts going off. There is another scream, and then they run off towards the main road. The 2 guys have stopped chasing them and are at the car now. My friend just gets dropped by an elbow in one hit. They come at me. I am in no way a fighter at all. I swing a punch at this guy. He sees it coming and headbutts my fist. I immediately know that my wrist is broken. They all just close in around us and kick the absolute shit out of us. My friend is stabbed 4 times in the chest/belly. The BF is stabbed once in the belly and once through the cheek. I get a deep cut, but no actual stab wound on my shoulder where the guy swished the blade at me, and it cut through my jacket and t-shirt and still cut me deep. I cannot even list all of the injuries that we sustained, but we got messed up completely and utterly. They finally stop hitting us and all jog over to the car. They have taken the keys and used them to cancel the alarm. We hear the engine go on. All this laughter and chanting like egging themselves on. I look up and see like 8 of them pushing the car up over the curb to the edge of the hill at the bottom of which we lie, barely able to move. the car starts rolling down the hill straight towards us. It's either move or possibly die on impact. My friend is in the worst shape, but me and the BF managed to crawl over and drag all of us out of the path of the car. The car cruises by so damn quickly and smashes into this picnic table about 40 feet away from us, totally uprooting it from the concrete. The men just leave after that, and we can still hear them laughing for a few minutes. We just lie there. I vomit and pass out. I wake up with the ambulance people fussing over all of us. That relief that hit me when I saw them, it's a feeling I cannot describe. My friend's boyfriend and I spent 3 days in the hospital. The other friend had to be revived 3 times in the ambulance and then spent 3.5 weeks in the hospital. He has never been the same since then, and we don't see each other anymore. He has all of these problems with depression and anxiety now, the poor bastard. Easily the worst night of my life. Hey, hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you want to hear more, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment because it lets YouTube know you like the content and helps more people to see these videos. My next big goal for the channel is 100,000 subscribers, and as a celebration, I will be doing a Q&A video once we hit that goal. Thank you, and back to the stories. I've been sitting on this story for over 40 years. I wasn't sure if I should ever post it, but lately, I've seen some folks here sharing creepy wilderness encounters, and it stirred something in me. This is not a ghost story or a Bigfoot sighting, though honestly, I might have preferred that. This is something that really happened that still makes my hair on my neck stand up when I think about it. It was June 1980. I was 19. I just finished my first year of college and living with my folks in the East Bay for the summer. That weekend, I told them I was heading up to Marin to do a solo overnight hike. This was back before we worried so much about that kind of thing. No cell phones or GPS. I just had a paper map, a compass, and the confidence of a dumb 19-year-old. I planned a loop hike through Mount Tamalpais State Park. I left early Saturday morning and parked at a small turnout on Panoramic Highway. There were maybe 3 cars already there, no one else around. Perfect. The hike started out just like any other, me and the trail. The woods were dense in some places, opening up into sunny meadows and then closing again under a thick canopy of redwoods. I passed one older couple in the first 2 hours, but otherwise, it was just me and the birds. Around mid-afternoon, I was maybe a half a mile away from the camp, hiking a little loop trail that led to a scenic overlook. I came around the bend and nearly jumped out of my skin. There was a man standing dead center on the trail, just standing there. He was tall, skinny, almost lanky, with thinning gray hair and these round glasses that made his eyes look bugged out. He looked like someone's dad, but with a weird energy. He was wearing a tan hiking vest over a blue shirt and had a camera hanging from his neck. "I didn't mean to startle you," he said, smiling way too wide. His voice was calm, but there was this noticeable stutter. I mumbled something like, "It's okay," but I was definitely on edge. Something about his posture did not feel right. He did not move out of the way. He just stood there, smiling. Eventually I stepped around him and kept on walking, and he turned to walk beside me, which was not welcome. "You out here alone?" he asked. The stutter was not severe, but it was odd. It did not match the weird confidence in his body language. It was like his mouth and his brain were on different tracks. The way he said "alone" dragged out, like he was savoring the word. I hesitated. I did not want to lie, but I did not want to answer either. "Just meeting some friends later," I said. He laughed softly. "Good spot for it," he said. "Not a lot of people outside today." I just nodded and kept on walking faster, hoping he would take the hint, but he didn't. He followed me for maybe another 5 minutes, talking about birds and trees and how he lived in the area for a long time. I remember thinking it was strange how he stuttered on some words but not others. Then suddenly he just said, "Well, I'll let you get to it," and turned back down the trail, disappearing into the trees. I don't know how to describe the feeling he left behind. It was like someone had turned the temperature down 20 degrees. I stood there for a while, staring in the direction he had gone. I don't remember finishing the loop. I just headed back to my car, adrenaline buzzing. That night I did not sleep much. Every twig snap or rustle outside my tent made my heart jump. I kept thinking about that guy's smile, how wide it was, like it didn't reach his eyes. And the stutter, it just kept on playing on my mind. It felt like part of a mask. He just seemed so strange. It seemed like he was trying to seem non-threatening, like the stutter was fake. I eventually dozed off, probably around 3 or 4 a.m., and left first thing in the morning. Here is the part that still messes me up. That afternoon I was driving home, and I flipped on the AM radio. The top story on the local news was about another hiker who had been found dead, shot execution style in the woods near Mount Tam. The body had been discovered earlier that morning, just a few miles away from where I camped. I pulled over and just sat there. I don't remember exactly what the reporter said, but the words serial killer and trailside stuck in my head. I didn't tell my folks. I told them that the hike was good and that the weather was fine. I didn't mention the guy on the trail or the news report. I don't think I fully processed it yet. Honestly, I did not want to admit to myself that I might have been in serious danger. But over the next few days, I could not shake the feeling that something had been really, really wrong. I started paying attention to the news. A second body was found a few days later. Another hiker, a woman in her 20s, shot in the back of the head and left just off the trail. Again, near Mount Tam. Police were not saying much, but the anchor mentioned the possibility of a serial offender. A name started circulating, the trailside killer. I started digging. I went to the library after work and flipped through newspapers on microfilm. What I found chilled me. There had already been a string of murders over the past years, mostly women, all hikers, all shot in isolated areas around Marin, Santa Cruz, and the East Bay, always with a .38 or .44 caliber handgun. Some were bound, some were partially clothed. There were vague references to additional trauma. One reporter wrote that the autopsy reports were too graphic to summarize in print. The thought that the man I had met might have done that to multiple people made my skin crawl in a way I'd never felt before. Up until then, I'd been clinging to the idea that maybe I'd just misread the situation. Maybe he was just a weird guy. But when I imagined the same flat smile, the awkward stutter, hovering over someone who could not fight back, I stopped making excuses. Fast forward to 1984. I watched a special on TV about California serial killers. Suddenly, there he was, the face, the same bug-eye glasses, the weird smile. David Carpenter, the trailside killer. I felt like I was going to throw up. Turns out Carpenter had a rap sheet going back all the way to the late 40s, in and out of prison for horrible crimes. He'd been holding jobs, hiking, hiding in plain sight. The show mentioned at least 10 confirmed murders, but investigators thought that the real number might be higher. There was no doubt in my mind that was the guy I met on the trail. Same stutter, same too wide smile. I hadn't imagined it. I had not exaggerated it. In 2003, I finally did what I should have done 20 years earlier. I called the police, just the non-emergency line. I told them I thought I'd encountered David Carpenter in 1980. They were polite, took down my statement. I never heard back, but I didn't care. I just needed to tell someone. That same year, Carpenter came up for potential execution. His name popped up in newspapers again. His photo was everywhere. Same damp face, same glasses, same thin smile. I kept thinking, why wasn't I one of them? In 2010, a friend sent me a Reddit post about the trailside killer. I read every word, and in the comments, I learned a detail that cemented how close I came to evil that day. David Carpenter was alleged to lose his stutter when he had victims where he wanted them. He got so excited he lost his stutter. I find that both relieving and utterly terrifying. Does anyone have any experiences with waking up in an empty world? Hey X, I'm sorry for any formatting errors or anything of that sort. This is my first time posting here. I feel like I am out of options, and this may be the only place where I can get some semblance of an answer. I thought I was doing better, but this weekend, I could not stop thinking about this event. I have work tomorrow, and figure that getting it all written out might help me get a few hours of sleep. This all occurred about 6 years ago, the summer I graduated from high school. Me and 3 friends were all going to colleges hours away from each other, so as for a final hurrah, we all pitched in, and rented a cabin in the Appalachians for a week. It was maybe 10 minutes away from the nearest town, but still surrounded by development. The whole thing was probably more tourist trap than anything, but we did not care. We planned to spend the days hiking and exploring the nearby towns, then spend the night shooting the shit and playing COD Zombies on my buddy's old Xbox 360. We spent the majority of the first day just driving up there, and it was dark by the time we got to the cabin. We set everything up, chose rooms, and played a few rounds of Keno on the TV in the common area. We called it a night a few hours later, and we all planned to get up early the next morning. I want to emphasize that we did not have drugs of any kind with us. I've tried to tell this story to my parents, and they were convinced that this was nothing more than a bad trip. This was not the case. The next morning, I woke up with my alarm at 7 a.m. I went downstairs to find I am the only one up, even though we all agreed to get up at this time. I went to my friend's room and started knocking on his door to try to wake him up. No response. At this point, I am a bit fed up, so I open up his door and enter. Nothing. The covers of his bed are messed up, like someone had been sleeping in them, and his luggage was here, but he was gone. At this point, I thought that these assholes had just left early. I checked the other two rooms and saw that they were empty as well. Just to be sure they left, I went out to the driveway. The car was still there. I figured that this must just be a part of some joke that they decided to pull on me. I walked back in and started yelling for them, telling them to cut the bullshit so we could start hiking. Nothing. No response but my slight echo. I tear through the house trying to find them, but they are not here. At this point, the only spot they could be is the woods out back. I call one of them and hear his phone ring from upstairs. I find it laying on the nightstand next to his bed. Repeat the process and see that all of these assholes have left their phones home. I spend about 5 minutes looking for them out there when I notice that the woods are quiet. I am by no means a woodsman and spent my entire childhood in the suburbs, but even I could feel that the forest should not be this quiet. There were no birds, none of the summer insects, just the quiet breeze through the trees. I say screw it, and decide that if they want to spend the first morning hiding in the woods to screw with me, I am just going to wait inside. I play some zombies again, but after about 30 minutes pass, I start getting worried. There is no reason for them to not be back by now. I start to get really worried. I write a note, telling them that I am looking for them in the woods, and to call me if they find the note before I find them. 30 minutes in these terrifyingly quiet woods, and still nothing. I have no clue what to do, so I go back to the cabin and call my parents. First, my mom does not answer, then my dad. I then call 911. At the time, it felt like a bit of an overreaction, but I did not know what else to do. The line rings for about 5 minutes, but is never picked up. The only thing I can think of is just to drive into town to try and find help. I search around, take the keys, and head off in my buddy's SUV. I get about 5 minutes down the road when I see some asshole who has his car stopped in the middle of the lane. I swerve around him, only to come across more of these cars, just stopped. I look inside as I pass by them, and they are all empty. By the time I am close to the town, the roads are blocked by these empty, parked cars, all of them still running. I think this was the moment I realized I was alone. I am not going to act like that thought never crossed my mind earlier, but this was the first evidence I had of it. I make it into the small town, and it is devoid of people. There is no one manning the gas station I enter, no one in the diner next door. I break down into tears. How else do you react to this realization? I spent the rest of that day just looking for anything to show that someone was still there. Nothing all day. I make my way back to the house and go to sleep, hoping that all of this is some bad nightmare that I will wake up from. I don't. By the next morning, I fully believe that I am the last human on Earth. I wish I could say that I had some enlightened response to this realization, but the first thing I did was jack off. I stripped butt-ass naked, walk out onto the back porch, and play the skin flute looking out onto the woods. What the I mean, at least he's honest, I guess. Following my act of self-expression, I tried to figure out a game plan. I figure that the most important thing to figure out is a food situation, as I have already stress-eaten my way through half of the food that we brought with us. I raided the gas station and the supermarket and came back with a hoard of non-perishable food, bottled water, and junk food. I stopped by a diner and used the flat-top griddle to try to make some of the canned foods a little bit more edible. It does not work. I spent what I think were about 3 weeks just trying to keep my mind occupied. I can go more in depth about this if any of you are interested. I began to venture farther away from the place that we are staying and began to explore some of the surrounding towns. I spent some nights sleeping in the car, some nights sleeping in motels off the highway. I spent one night in a diner whose walls were covered in Sasquatch posters. There were no animals or bugs around either, but the trees seemed fine. One morning, I drive to another small town and step out to take a piss. Here, however, there was a sound. For the first time in days, I hear the sound of a car idling. This was unique, as most of the other cars had all ran out of gas days, if not weeks ago. It is parked outside of a brick building near the outskirts of the town. I approach cautiously and enter the building. Here I see the first human since everyone disappeared. He is at the end of a long hallway, in a room filled with filing cabinets. He is tearing through them, like he is looking for something. I wish I could say that he looked particularly interesting, or was wearing something like a hazmat suit, but honestly, he just looked about as normal as you could be. A mid-40s, slightly overweight, average height man, wearing a rolled up collared shirt and jeans. I clear my throat to let him know that I am there, and he turns around. He has a normal looking face, with salt and pepper hair and a buzz cut. He sees me and breaks into a smile and says, "You are not anon yet, right?" in an almost joking manner, like he knew the answer would be no. I stare back with a look of confusion, and his expression changes on a dime. He looks partly shocked, partly furious, partly confused, like I just told him I shit on his cereal. He looks into my eyes, and within a second of our gaze meeting, I am bolting upright in bed at the cabin. I frantically look around and see all of my friends are still there. I try to explain to them what happened, but they all make fun of me for being so scared of a nightmare. It wasn't a dream though. I remember it as vividly as memories, and during it, I tried to wake myself up multiple times. All the places I visited were exactly the same out of the dream. I had never been to that Sasquatch diner before, but I convinced my friends to drive over there, and just like in the dream, it was covered in Sasquatch posters, this time with staff running it. The only exception to this was the brick building where I saw the man. We drove through the town, but the building was gone. This pretty much ruined my life. I know that part of this is just my lazy ass trying to make excuses, but I truly feel this way. I don't think my life is real. By any stretch, it feels just as real as that dream. I've dealt with stress because of this. I do not sleep well anymore. I have no motivation to keep going in life. I dropped out of college halfway through my first semester and now work a shit job for shit pay. My parents have paid for therapists, but none of them have helped. They all tried to convince me I dreamt it all, but I know that is not true. I have given up on therapy. I really hope some of y'all can give me some answers. I need them.